He was trying for that.
Yep.
Oh, he's out in Colorado Springs training at the Olympic Training Center.
Not to arm wrestle him now.
Yeah.
Well, his little sister was in powerlifting for years too, though.
Well, that I knew. But it's...
Just imagine
the youngest
like
of his kids.
16th century Englishmen bullying Quakers and then seeing this power lifter from the 21st century show up.
Oh, I was just talking with someone earlier, was talking about how Woody Allen made a joke about getting beaten up by Quakers at one point. He did in one of his movies. He mentioned, I'm so weak I got beaten up by Quakers.
That's awesome. I did a little powerlifting once upon a time. It's pretty fun.
I didn't. I'm sure you guys didn't realize that. I never did.
It's awesome because you basically condense your whole workout into like picking something up 5 times in a row.
Okay then.
You
I
just
did
distill
karate.
My extended
hours on the
powerlifting
treadmill.
I did karate and kickboxing.
working
That's what
on
I
the
did.
farm. So.
Howdy.
Yeah.
Hello.
Very quickly shirt there.
Yeah, just
It's becoming his Wednesday shirt.
a Tuesday shirt.
Or Tuesday shirt. Yeah. Sorry.
I'll wear it again.
It may be his Wednesday shirt too. You never know.
He wears it every day.
I was on vacation, so
Yes,
that's
that's
all his
He just have a closet full of Dr. Pepper shirts. Right?
Well,
I know that's not
I mean, I have a tendency to go out and I buy the same shirt in 6 different colors.
You're nuts if you don't.
You can actually get different colors of it?
If you like it, you better.
I have multiple Hero Academy shirts.
Nice.
Legend of Zelda.
I mostly wear
yes.
Carhartt, so.
I've got multiple
Guys
of
in
that.
style now.
So as we get started
Green and
here,
gold.
I'm going to share with you an email that I got.
What?
They somewhere along the line, somebody thought that we were having a Taco Tuesday class and invited us to join their pampered chef.
I really hope it's the algorithm. I hope it's YouTube algorithm.
That's really fun.
Okay.
This has actually just all been a long con. Jared's trying to get us under
Yeah,
his
I'm just trying to get you involved in my multi-level marketing scheme.
Right.
So
Do you have Kraken?
Yeah, they've got like a 50-50 shot as to
Now
what
the
they're
important
doing.
question is, does he have Craggle? Does he have Craggle is the important question.
I don't know.
Like Lego movie?
Yes.
Taco Tuesday.
The Craggle.
But I just thought that was hilarious that I got that today.
That's my day.
it's pretty good.
Improve your Taco Tuesday class by joining Pampered Chef.
They have to do the prize drawing.
Okay.
It's Talking Tuesday, but
Close.
Nice try. Oh, how did they get it?
I don't even know.
Unless they have like our bulletin, you know.
Well,
Well, we
it
do post
is-
on YouTube, but YouTube does
It's on
kind of an
YouTube,
interesting algorithm.
Yeah.
YouTube.
So
If it hears you
obviously,
even
Google
say something.
has.
You want to know something? Last Thursday, you know, constantly on Facebook, you might be interested. And this guy popped up, and it's like, Norbert Rolvis. Oh. Okay. I was in the service in the mid-70s with Norbert. I called him Junior. He was one of the seamen on board our ship, and we went fishing and snorkeling and stuff. How it ever figured out.
And Facebook went, you might know
Pop
this
it up.
person. Okay. Did you send a friend request like it was suggested?
No, I sent him a note and said,
Hey, Junior.
yeah. I go, were you on the Melon in Hawaii? And he goes, yes, I was. And I go, how you going, Junior? And he goes, I don't think I qualify as Junior anymore. He's he just retired, so he's about 4 or 5 years younger than me, maybe 6.
That's awesome.
Hey, that's a nice welcome.
Yeah.
He lives in Colorado Springs.
Okie dokie. So you're in contact now.
Yeah. And now it keeps sending me to all of his kids.
Yeah.
And grandkids.
Now, is he telling them stories about you? Now, is the next question.
Probably.
Okay, I think everybody's here now.
Oh, should we scooch over?
No?
So next week is class, or the questioning, finding answers together session. So
Is this my book or is that my book?
I think that's your
I
book.
think that's
Okay.
Colorado is fine that each difference. Unless you take
there's
No,
only one
I didn't
chapter
really
left. So
But if you did, then it's important that we figure out which one.
it's a very intensive chapter too. After this one,
Oh, yeah.
All
I
2
noticed
days.
that, yeah.
it's 2 pages.
Oh.
But I'll get a good 2-hour discussion going on it.
Yep.
I'm sure you can.
I've done worse.
Because it's funny ways.
I did a 3-week sermon series on 2 verses once.
That's
He's not kidding.
So when I was younger,
That's not supposed to do that.
Temptation of Jesus, I had a very long one on that too. Got halfway through my sermon, I'm like, oh, it's 12:30. I guess I should probably stop. So
Yeah.
that was before I came here. So
What was that?
anyway, as they come in, how did you like chapter 5? Gathering worship. I like that name too.
I feel like I'm going to have to read it again in the future. Because I feel like it feels very repetitive still at this point, and I'm not able to fully engage with the nuance of what he's saying in chapter to chapter.
Yeah, it is. It's been good. I've grown up in the Friends Church, and it's been good for me as well. So Eric, this is an email that I got today. Somebody said that we could intensify our Taco Tuesday class by joining their Pampered Chef Zoom call. So I thought that was important to share.
They're doing parties in your house.
That our taco or our Talking Tuesday has gone viral. Not the right way.
Bill does say that friends feel like all spiritual things are enhanced by food or something like that.
Yeah.
There you go.
He compared it to you.
I know I
Yes.
That's why we tend to have our business meetings after we eat. Because you're calmer then.
Less likely to be hangry.
If we serve turkey, then half of you are asleep, so we just move on through.
If you bring up things quick enough, you can pass almost anything.
So
We could do like one of our former clerks and just rewrite the minutes afterwards.
Oh no.
Yeah, we did discuss that.
That's the evil friends.
I did like this chapter. I thought it was one of the better chapters in the book. Mainly because it's like, oh, I'm not doing everything completely wrong. Oddly enough, they really don't have a class for being a Quaker pastor.
Sounds like it.
It's its own odd thing, and nobody actually knows what to do as a Quaker pastor, because all the books are written for a more Protestant version of pastoral ministry, so Presbyterian, Baptist, something like that. We don't do things the way that they do. And how are you a pastor when you're one among many? And everybody's equal.
That's a concept I've never been able to wrap my head around. Is you read in some of those fiction literature and historical literature. They comment that so-and-so pastor owns the church. And it's like,
Just think of yourself as a
interesting
brand.
concept. Church as a business.
Right.
It doesn't work very good, so.
In any story that I've read where that's a thing, it's called Legion.
Usually it's a cult.
Yes.
So the first quote that I liked was, "Silence is where Quakers believe we encounter the real presence of Christ. Since we do not have, or don't have rites or symbols or use bread or wine, Jesus comes to us in the peace of the silence." I thought that was kind of interesting. And when I do worship with bread and wine and other symbols, I tend to gravitate back to silence even when everybody else moves on and does other things. So, and oddly enough, he talked about taking a group of kids to the Catholic Church to a midweek mass. The first church that I was a pastor of, the second church technically, but in Ark City, which is where Camp Quaker Haven is, we had a ministry alliance, and every Thanksgiving they'd have an ecumenical service, and that year it was at the Catholic Church, and they always asked the newest pastor in the alliance to be the speaker, so I actually gave a message at the Catholic Church, and after the message I had everybody do silence, and the priest said 3 months later, because he and I got along really good, and I was going through my master's program at the time, and he'd read a lot of what I wrote just to check it out. He actually sent some of it on to his bishop, which is kind of funny. But he said after 3 months, his parishioners were still asking to do silence before they moved on after the Mass.
Okay.
So
That's cool.
it was really interesting that it crosses lines. So, and everybody can participate, which he gets into. So he brings up a verse at the end of the chapter, 1 Kings 19, 11 through 13, and he's brought it up before.
Yep.
So I thought, let's read through it again. And he said, "Go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke into pieces the rock before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak, and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him, and said, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" So what does this tell us about God?
You go back to it
We've gone over this verse multiple times.
Yeah, we have. It's a very good verse. I mean, Quakers really like this passage for some reason. That and the psalm that says, "Be still and know that I am God."
Well, I kind of wonder if it has something to do with the beliefs at the time too. Just imagining God as sending down lightning bolts and maybe and things like and causing natural disasters.
It could be.
but God wasn't in the earthquake or the natural disaster, but was in just a quiet bush.
This is right after Elijah called fire from heaven and all of that.
The whole contest with Baal.
The Baal tournament of the gods.
It's not in the external, it's more in the internal. You know,
It's not in the showy.
yeah.
Elijah did some definite trash talking there. He did.
Maybe God was saying, dude, what are you doing?
Elijah's awesome.
Is your God in the toilet or something?
Yeah.
Or something to that
So,
effect.
Jared, I apologize. I just wanted to look at that scripture. Do you mind going back to it? 1 Kings, some 19. Okay. Thank you. Because I realized I never really read like the whole thing. It's always just quoting that one part.
Yeah.
Usually, like can't remember ever reading the whole thing. I'm sure I did sometime long ago. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to get on.
So, what's it tell us about God, and what does it tell us about ourselves? What do we expect God to be? We expect Him to do the big things a lot of times, to show up with power. We want Him to show up with power. I remember when I was a kid getting bullied in grade school, I set up a little pile of sticks and I prayed really hard that God would start a fire so all the bullies would know that I'm not as dumb as they thought I was. So he didn't do it, and that's probably good because I would have gotten kicked out of school. But yeah, we expect some things out of God. And this kind of tells us to check ourselves. God's not in the big things a lot of times. He's in the little things. The quiet things. The things that we don't expect. And Elijah was able to see that. What would have happened if he went out during the wind? Or during the fire? Or during the earthquake?
Would have ended up in Oz. Would have had a good sunburn. I don't know the earthquake part, but
Yeah, Kansas, I mean, we know strong winds and,
would
and
have ended up in
fire.
Oz.
Yeah.
And I know what my dad would have done during those times. Because we had a tornado go over our house twice. And the people from the whole community came to dig us out. And my dad asked a question once. He's like, what's a tornado look like when it's coming straight down on top of you?
You don't want the answer to that.
I mean, it does say the Lord passed by, and then a great strong, all that stuff came.
It
So
said
almost sounds like,
before the Lord came. So,
oh, maybe I'm reading it wrong. It says,
He wasn't
said,
in-
go out and stand by the mountain before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind toward the mountains.
You know, I should ask for a
before
very
the
hard
Lord.
thing.
So that came before the Lord came.
It says, stand before the Lord, and then the Lord passed by. Maybe it's my translation,
Yeah.
because it does
But
say,
it does say, but the Lord was not in the wind.
right. But those things, I mean, oh, it's just interesting to look at the before part 2. Like those things, I wonder if those things happened because the Lord passed by. Like, maybe the Lord was showing off, but then he was like whispering as well.
Yeah, that's kind
It's
of always
also-
pointed out. There's the signs early.
But then he's like, what are you doing here, killing all these prophets? I mean, I don't know. Did God tell him to kill the prophets?
The prophets Baal, that was...
No, actually, he did not.
He did not.
So
That
what
was
are you doing?
that was the Jewish commandment.
He did. I mean, he killed one, or he killed some that were there, but he sent the rest of the people out to kill the rest. So
Sometimes I yell at my kids really loud when they're being bad. And then when I have their attention, like they're not there ignoring me, they're doing something bad, I stop what you're doing. This is what I want you guys to do. This is what I expect of you. Maybe, I mean, I wonder if that's what's going on.
it could
Don't
be.
go around calling prophets baldy either.
Yeah, Elisha. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Elisha bald and bears will come.
It'll be unbearable.
So, what's this teach us about our spiritual lives? So why was Elijah in the cave in the first place?
Was he running away from the angry people?
He's running away from Jezebel
Mm-hmm.
That's who he killed all the
and Ahab. He is depressed.
She didn't like the prophecy about her.
He's eating food from crows, which is funny because crows are unclean animals, yet he was eating food from the crows.
That's a cool part, though.
Which,
I don't think that'd make me depressed.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's really interesting when people get tied up on clean and unclean and all that, and it's like, but God used the unclean too.
Yeah.
So
Kind of did that with in New Testament, made a big deal about it with Solomon.
So he saw all this great, amazing stuff. He went to the cave depressed, asking to die. And then God says, stand before me, and there's wind and earthquake and fire. And he doesn't come out of the cave until there's stillness. And it's that stillness that opened his eyes. And shortly after this is when Elisha comes in. And when we started this Talking Tuesday, I had just preached about Elisha, or when Elijah went up into heaven in the fiery chariot, and Elisha kept saying to the prophets, or the sons of the prophets, be quiet, I know. And he said it like 4 times at each of the towns that they visited. And what he was saying, he wasn't telling them to shut up. He's telling them to be still. And he's reminding them of what Elijah was teaching him. This be still before God. And the wording is that he's talking about the stillness of at the cave.
Asking for a double helping of Elijah's spirit was a hard thing, apparently.
I wouldn't ask for that.
Elijah did.
You know, I was just reading it, and it says, like, after he gets fed, he goes to the Mount of God, and then the Lord says, what are you doing here, Elijah? Doesn't talk about anything like how God said or whatever. And Elijah said, I've been very jealous of you, Lord, and you know, your people of Israel, they forsaken the covenants, did bad things, I killed them. And then God says, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord, and behold, the Lord passed by. And then all that stuff happens, and he says, what are you doing? And I just got the feeling that God was saying, if I wanted to punish all those people who are forsaking the covenants, I could do it easily. I could cause earthquakes, fires, all this stuff. So what are you doing? Taking vengeance into your own hands. That's the feeling I got from that. It's like what God's asking.
It's part of it, yeah.
I know Moses got in trouble for something similar with the breaking with the staff to the rock, bringing out water thing.
Yeah. It goes back to what does it tell us about God? What does it tell us about us and our expectations
Yeah.
and our place?
Yeah. Exactly.
So silence, when we worship with others, becomes a means of grace. That's because it brings us into God's presence. Worship becomes Eucharistic when we sense God's presence with our group. So what is a means of grace? David grew up in a Lutheran church. was part of a Lutheran church for a while. They talk about means of grace.
Oh,
Usually how people talk about like sacraments, right? Not sure I know how to articulate it better than that, except for that.
It's something that brings us into the grace of God.
Yeah, I grew up Christian church disciples of Christ, which are about the most vanilla church that you could possibly find anywhere. And when I went away to college, I had a whole bunch of friends that were both Catholic and Episcopalian, and I became for a while very enamored with the ceremony because I didn't grow up with any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then over time, I became very disenchanted with ceremony and actions for the sake of actions. And it's part of the reason I feel I fit here. It really, really is something. And we've had it here various times. People would come and they're wanting to stand and wave and hold their hands up, and then it's like, just sit and think about God. You don't have to wave at him. You don't have to go, I'm here, for him to know you're there. That's for the people around you and for you. And so I like the I've come back to the non-ceremonial things. That covers a period of 70 plus years. So.
I like what you said, David, about it being for the people, like all that stuff, and it's not necessarily needed. I kind of think of means of grace as like a lot of different spiritual practices. Like there's lots of them out there, right? But they can all be a means of grace of experiencing. The grace of God.
What it does in my mind is it reminds me of a song. Who was it? What's his name? Ray Stevens?
Ray Stevens, guy who does like the streak and everything's beautiful and all that.
Yeah. His song, The Mississippi Squirrel.
The one about the church revival?
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of. Oh no! I don't know what he's talking about. I can't sing the song, I don't have it memorized, but a squirrel makes this whole church something go, ah! Because everybody thinks everybody else is reacting to the spirit, but no, they're reacting to a squirrel jumping through them.
So 1 Chronicles 13, 1 through 4. David consulted the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds with every leader. And David said to all the assembly of Israel, if it seems good to you, and from the Lord our God, let us send abroad to our brothers who remain in all the lands of Israel, as well as the priests and the Levites in the cities that have pasture lands, that they may be gathered to us. Then let us bring again the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it for the days of Saul. All the assembly agreed to do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. So that kind of talks about a means of grace. In their eyes, they neglected the ark during Saul's reign of king, and they were afraid that that was going to cause God to lose favor, or them to lose favor in God's eyes, so they were trying to bring that back.
That's another story.
Yeah.
The whole losing of the ark thing.
But as I was reading through that, this is something that is written in a New Interpreter's Bible commentary. Another favorite theme of the chronicler appears here: seeking God. Verse 3 mentions seeking God via the ark. To neglect the ark was to neglect God, a symptom of the way to exile chosen by Saul. The road to restoration calls for the active concern for God, and so for the discharge of religious duties that serve to express it. I can really read today. Whatever denomination we belong to, we all have religious rites and forms that are part of that denominational tradition, whether high or low, traditional or contemporary. Of course, any can degrade into a human commandment learned by rote, if the hearts of those who perform it are far from the Lord. There is an opposite danger when religious habits are disregarded. The Jewish scholar Israel Abrams shrewdly observed, what can be done at any time and in any manner is liable to be done at no time or in no manner. So what he's saying is there can be things that draw us closer to God, and things that can, if we do them, but if we're not really in them, then they're just empty. And silence can be that, or it can be something more powerful if we actually participate in the right mindset. And that's the same with taking communion, baptism, singing, reading scripture even. I don't know how many times I've made it my custom to read scripture every day, and I read it. I didn't read a single thing in it, yet I checked off the box and didn't think about it one bit. If you're not actually in it, it's not doing anything. And that's what David's getting at is we're neglecting. Let's get back to what's important. So
I feel like that's a song somewhere. Part of worship.
yeah.
That's about a squirrel.
No, different song.
Funny.
No, that is an actual song.
Just joking.
Funny.
Yeah, look it up
Part of
after
worship
this.
song.
I looked it up already. I'll play the song.
Yeah. Okay, it's
Probably don't want to do it in the middle of it.
Funny
no.
thing about that song is written by one of the more recent composers of Christian music, and at the time his pastor wasn't letting them sing it during worship because he didn't want it to be rote. So they did basically in this very Pentecostal church, they basically did Quaker style of worship where they didn't sing. They were silent a lot. And after a period of time when they did that, that's when he wrote the song. So it's kind of interesting.
Get the fan going. Right. You get the fan going. Tractor.
This is the story about the fan wasn't in the original. That's something that he added in the new edition, which is kind of cool. It's one of the best stories in the whole book. But when we join others in silence, expectant waiting, though it is probable that we will discover a deeper sense of God's presence in our lives individually and corporately than we could in solitary contemplation. It is as if we were each candles. Each gives off a little light where it is. But when candles are brought together in a place and placed on an altar of worship, the entire holy space is bathed in warm, flickering light. And then goes on about the kids putting the candles on the altar, the table in the middle of their worship space. Have you ever seen candle-driven machines?
Yeah.
You probably made them in homeschool stuff, so.
We might have a while back, but I've seen them on like shows.
Yeah. So he goes and explains this high voltage ceiling, and the 25 candles was enough to start moving the fans.
That's crazy that happened.
So I like the fact that Steve Mills gives a soft chuckle and when he opens his eyes to see what's going on, he sees that going on. So it is a good picture of what corporate worship can do. It's not necessarily we're moving God, but God's moving us.
There's something special about corporate worship.
So what group, existing or new, could I hold silence with? Hopefully this one.
Hopefully this is one of them. Hopefully there's more than one.
We don't worship the silence. He says that multiple times in this book. The silence is just a means by which we find ourselves brought together in community. and our souls lifted to God. The silence deepens as we feel ourselves drawn beautifully to God and to each other. Our hearts and souls burst with thanksgiving, a thanksgiving best expressed by silence. Silence grows from the awe. From awe is the natural human response to hints of the divine. The Mercy Me song, when I stand in your presence, or to my knees will I fall. What is the name of that song?
I can only imagine.
I can only
That's
imagine.
what got him started. It's what got his career started.
Yeah, it's the only song he really did.
Well, he's done some since then, but
Yeah,
that's what got him started.
I like their Irish feeling one a little more, but yeah, it's
They even made a
how do we
movie about
respond to the divine? We don't really know.
Yes, wait,
But
let's-
chances
yeah.
are, in a lot of things, when we're taken by surprise, we're struck dumb. To a Quaker, all space is sacred. Though one of the most surprising places Quaker silence was ever held was at Gestapo headquarters. And that's a really interesting story that Brent did not do well in explaining. But luckily, some kids made a movie and they won an award for Best Documentary in the middle school category at the Bridge Film Festival in 2004 about this event.
This is the video?
Like I said, it's a good video, so of course I'm going to put it out.
Sounds like a horror movie so far.
Well,
Horror movie so far.
it is set in the Gestapo headquarters.
Again, 1920s though.
Okay.
It's fun.
I know this story. It's just that I've never seen this video. Okay, where's my cardboard box? Where's my cardboard box? Okay.
We have the documents. Where's the English German translation? Yeah, hold on that. I'm not here earlier. I know who you are, so you can sit down. How can I help you?
The Quakers began intense negotiations with the Gestapo after handing them 2 copies of a proposal to set up transshipment locations to remove the Jews from Germany. They reminded Dr. Erlinger of the Gestapo that after World War I, Quakers eased the pain and suffering of 1.5 million Germans and Austrians by supplying desperately needed food and shelter. The Quakers asked that the Nazis release the Jews into their custody. In the meeting, Rufus Jones said, We do not come to judge or criticize or push ourselves in, but to inquire in the most friendly manner whether there is anything we can do to promote life and human welfare and relieve suffering. This may have been the first time the Nazis saw these events from a different perspective and with a peaceful solution to the situation. After Dr. Erlinger left the room to discuss the Quaker's request with his superior, Rufus Jones and his colleagues commenced a meeting for worship.
Yeah.
25 minutes later, Dr. Erlinger and Dr. Lischka returned.
Everything you asked for is granted. That is pleasant if you'd like the report in writing. No, the Gestapo does not keep his reports in writing. What will be the end? Every word that has been spoken in this room has been recorded by mechanism and will be in the record. I'm Hitler.
Their position was a very salute.
We're not going to fault them for that.
Although the Nazis agreed to help the Quakers, the political situation in Europe quickly deteriorated and little could be accomplished despite their noble efforts. After returning to the States, Rufus Jones submitted a report to his meeting and concluded with, "What is perhaps of lasting significance is the sheer fact that 3 friends, modern practical men, faced enormous forces of evil and directly and quietly offer an alternative, the way of love."
Okay. Never seen that.
It was worth the 5 minutes, wasn't it?
Yeah, agreed, yes.
So Rufus Jones started the American Friends Service Committee in conjunction with the English Friends Service Committee, and during World War I, to give conscientious objectors a way to serve without being drafted.
Or being experiment. Did that lead to the experiments part, or that was a different thing?
No, they were basically the ambulance service for both sides. So they helped the Germans and as much as they helped the Allies. So, and they won the Nobel Peace Prize because of it. And Rufus then went back when war broke out again, and they were given permission to bring Jews out of Germany. Unfortunately, Roosevelt didn't let them get off the boats. So,
yeah.
But another very prominent Quaker at that time, Herbert Hoover, after he was president, went to Europe, and he's one of the only American presidents that have statues throughout Europe for him because of the amount of food and aid that he helped raise for during the and after the war. So
Americans didn't like him much.
They were very active, but that wouldn't have happened if they weren't willing to sit silent. The reason they left the room was to catch them saying something negative about the German government, and they didn't do it. So instead, they worshipped how they worship. So it's an interesting story. The way of Quaker silence is open to anyone or any group who wants to experience God in a new way. As with any faith tradition, it is the intention to worship that makes a time and place holy. Even at Gestapo headquarters. So can I imagine silence being active for a group of people I love and feel called to worship with? Silence is being active.
doing good just then.
Do what?
I think we did good just then.
Yeah.
For that question, we were pretty quiet.
Sitting in silence, we notice the folks around us. We see their heads bowed, their eyes looking toward heaven. We wonder, how are they? And then we remember a snippet of something said at school or about school or a sick parent or job promotion. We pray for them. They in silence settle into our soul and join us. At the same time that we hold them in God's light, they hold us. Our wondering about whether we set the timer on the oven or how the trustees could ever have picked mauve carpeting passes away as we come into the light of God. In that light, we feel ourselves drawn to each other and God.
That's one of the parts that I wrote down to just like underline that I really like that part. I didn't underline the book though, don't worry.
That's okay.
I'm just
It's your book. You can work on that.
I figured it'd be back at
We
the
had that discussion
library
earlier.
here.
No,
Oh, okay.
that's yours, so.
Oh, well.
We had the discussion about is this book mine or is this book yours? Because I didn't take notes, but if you did, it makes a difference.
I assumed it was ours.
Yeah.
But no, I like
I
this
will
part
put
a lot.
my copy in the church library, but that copy's for you.
I feel like I've done like a little bit of reading about contemplation and like Saint Teresa of Avila, she gives an explanation of how to pray and stuff, and like it just reminds me of that kind of like the different traditions, especially Catholicism, about how to contemplate and pray silently. It just matches up with that. It's like it's really good, and it's so true. Like anytime you're silent, that always happens.
Yeah, we're not. Fox didn't just pull this out of. I mean, it was always there. It's just we forgot. The thought that spoken words are part of communal silent worship sounds odd. But the speaking comes from a place deeper than a mere urge to say something. In Quaker meetings, a person speaks only if convinced that there is something that must be shared. My friend Canby always told me, speak only if you can improve the silence. The key point on that is must be shared. So the point is hearing God expressed through the human voice of a faithful person. The silence lets us reflect on what God has said through the words shared. It gives our heart time to hear the message. Our brains may have heard it right away, but our heart often takes longer. Words that linger in our hearts are often more helpful than those that pass quickly through our brains. So the idea is to slow down and let the seed take root. Once during his time there, speaking of Woolman being in the camp of Native Americans, he forgot about the interpreters and poured out his heart in prayer in English. Instead of being confused by what Woolman had said in his foreign tongue, the prophet-in-chief, I'm not going to pronounce his name,
I'm guessing.
put his hand on his own breast and declared, I love to feel where the words come from. When Amisa prays.
Mm.
That's exactly what I
Yeah.
No idea what you're saying.
have no clue. Occasionally I can pick up a word, but I feel where it's coming from.
No, she's praying something. Something very important to her. So yes, and do like hearing it.
How would I know when I'm being led to break the silence?
It's very hard for humans. How many of you have actually read the little cards that are in the chemical racks and used?
Oh, they're very cool. Yeah.
Those have been there for 10, 15 years. So they weren't put there for you guys.
That's funny.
We had a time period when there was a lot of
I love it.
things coming out as far as worship goes, had a lot of political context to there.
Yeah.
And that's when those were created.
When it was created long before that, but that's when
we put them out there as being those cards in particular. And it's very hard to tell if God moving you to talk, or is it your own desires causing you to talk. And that's extremely difficult to tell. And the hard part about it is there is no litmus test for anyone but you. So it's you could say something and no one can really dispute that God didn't move you to say it, but you internally, you probably know for sure whether it was you or God instigating it. And reflection on that is the important part.
What was that? That's not, I've never heard a friend put it that way.
Next
I love what you said, like there's like, it's like there's no litmus test except for, you, David. And it kind of was like, it's so true. It's like, and I feel like, if you need that thing, you probably shouldn't speak. If you're looking at that thing for if I should speak, you shouldn't speak. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're having to look at a flow chart to know, is this from God or not? It's probably not timing it, because that looks like my brain at the very beginnings of science.
Yeah.
Going every which way, like, do I go this way? Do I go that way? But then once it, actually I do like that part. Like, once you do return to the center, I mean, I think, sorry, let me grab that from you.
Of course.
I think it should go from here right to there. If you're having to go through any of this, it's right. So now I'm starting to like this thing. At first I said I don't like it.
What do you?
You're
just going to do the first one, right?
So actually I do like this thing. At first I didn't like it, but now that I'm talking about it, I'm like, yeah, like if you're having to do any of this stuff, you should go right on back to center.
Yeah.
But if you don't need this and you can go straight to that, then without needing any of that, then you're
just
good
to
to go.
show you there. You just taking this green yes and you just put it over here, right?
I wanted to do like just a big arrow. No, I'm going to change that at
I
all.
think
but-
you just. Well, then what are you doing?
Well-
Explain it again.
Oh.
How do you get to speak? Is what I'm asking.
Have I ever shown you the questionnaire that I put in one of my? I put a lot of my thought process
If
into
you're
character
so
diagrams, character
overwhelmed
surveys,
by
where
the
they
presence
allow
of God
backstories.
that you can't even, your eyes are too glossed over to even read these tiny writings, you know it's time to speak.
And so I think what you're really doing is you're taking that, you're just going straight from this one, right? You're only answering this question. You receive this message and you're giving.
So
The
When
question
you're,
would
I
be-
think at that point you can't perceive anything except Jesus, and so except then that's all you can do.
I think it's
Okay.
that feels like how you personally experience like the Holy Spirit moving with you. I experience it like I'm a very self-conscious person, so I can see it for myself. Like I might know I need to speak, but I'm going to doubt myself, and I'm going to doubt myself, and I'm going to go back to center, and that thought is going to keep coming back.
So
and
this
I'm going
could
to
be
keep
like
coming out
building
that
up
circle.
your.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm going to need that
Well-
going out and back in and out and back in and out and back in, and then eventually maybe I'll trust it.
And
Yeah.
and you know, I'm very similar in that way too. I get those same kind of thoughts like that, and that's why I think that we just have to all have grace for each other.
Yeah.
And like and like to me, practicing is good. But like David said, like this was made for like people who like NPR too much, right? Like you guys and Brent always are talking about NPR, Quakers and NPR. So people would get their message from NPR. But that's what it's like for people who are like, you know what?
Actually, put them out for Fox News, but
Oh yeah,
but the same concept goes. And it's important to realize this because you would, as a yearly meeting elder, I cannot tell you how many times the abuse of that tears churches apart. The abuse of speaking in the silence.
Like just because you spoke in the silence, that like people think, oh, it must have come from God, and therefore they have to listen to you.
Yeah, and people will dominate the service for their own agenda.
What's it called where someone filibuster?
Yeah, I mean, do you think there's ever an opposite where people shouldn't be encouraged to speak more? Because I think I would tend to.
Yes.
Well, that's probably not. But all these are pointed to no. So
Yeah, that's
you know what I mean? I think that's maybe. But it seems like the emphasis is on don't speak. But is there ever, a time where, or certain personalities, kind of like what you were saying,
Like when you
where
have-
you kind of do need to be encouraged, like, actually you might have, like, not that you just start coming up with stuff.
So
but,
are we
like,
talking like having a person always has other people speak for them, never actually saying anything themselves, and always have they say they believe this, but they didn't say that they believe that. They're just letting you say that they believe that.
This is very
Let's let
encouraging.
Leslie say what he
Well, I was just
said.
gonna say,
He's
sorry.
He's
You're
trying.
right. He's right. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It just circles back to what David was saying earlier. For David, it's the urge to speak is more strong, and for somebody like me, like if you give me the option to sit silently in a space and just listen and observe, I will. That's my natural inclination. That's what I want to do. And so this chart helps me to draw out and say like, no, I have to share this because it keeps coming up.
I mean, there are many things that pop into my head.
If you want, I'm sorry. You're speaking.
That pop into my head during service. And I'm a teacher. That's the core of me.
Yeah.
And I want to say things.
Yeah.
But I have to sit there and think about, am I saying this because it's a personality trait that bugs me? Or something like that? And so I very rarely speak. We have people in the meeting who have never spoken. But interestingly enough, they will come and speak to either Jared or I. And sometimes, if I think about it hard enough, I may not be saying my words. I may be saying the words of somebody else, because they brought it to me and I've thought about it long enough that I think that maybe the rest of the meeting needs to hear it, because it's a useful thing to think about. So it's all varied.
So are we talking about thinking about it a little bit before you decide to say anything on that? Or like,
I sometimes stew about things for months before I bring them up.
But reaching an actual conclusion, just not bursting out with it or anything like
Yeah,
that?
I purposely curb myself, because if I didn't, I would, and that's what we had going on when the time that these came out. People would say something, and then people would answer them.
Yeah.
And then people would say something, and it would turn into a
debate.
discussion across the room. And it's
Yeah, which is why
open
those
worship
questions
was
are-
never meant to be that.
I like this though because it protects the service from becoming something very personal. It allows it to be drawn back to the higher power working.
Yeah.
You know, and it allows you, like, are you just talking in response to the last speaker? You know what I mean? Like, that's for you, right? You respond all you want, but that's for you. You know, and it's not necessarily like don't respond, but you can have that internally.
And those that speak to hear themselves speak
Yeah.
tend to not get listened to after a while. And it actually has the exact opposite effect of what they were wanting to do in a lot of cases, because you're just like, okay, whatever, and goes on. So that it's one of those things where it just becomes part of like the traffic going down the street. So we have to be careful. As a pastor, I have to be careful because I preach too long. And I know what I want. And saying, I'm supposed to say it because I don't just, I pray about what I'm saying for 6 days and then I say it. So but it is, John Woolman in his journal would say, I had to repent of speaking too much or saying too much when all he said was 3 sentences. But it was, and yes, what you're getting at, what you asked, there was a time called Quaker quietism where nobody would say anything. Or very few people would say anything. And there were very few recorded ministers being recorded because nobody was saying anything. They kicked a lot of people out of meetings, but they didn't add a lot in because they weren't ministering. They weren't responding. They weren't listening, which goes back to this quote. I skipped over the now get ready for the straight dope, which I did like that quote too, Eric. So let's get back to the straight dope quote.
Yeah.
So it was
That was interesting. Well, I
we
wasn't
need to
expecting
move
that
on.
one.
So
I like it a little bit quicker.
that's why 2 things run through Quaker meeting: waiting and listening. We wait to feel the touch of the divine, and we listen for God's voice, both in silence and in speakers. So, if we are talking because it's for ourselves, we're not letting people hear what God has to say, because we're taking the place of God sometimes. And it's very hard to do, because we have our beliefs, we have our passions, we have what we think is important. Even Rufus Jones, who did some amazing things, had his own personal agendas, and we'll get into those in our next history session, because Rufus caused a lot of problems because he was famous. Everybody knew Rufus Jones. So it was, if we aren't mindful of the weight that we carry sometimes in a meeting, and take a step back and submit to one another and to God, then we run the chance of somebody not hearing what they need to hear.
This is very much in line with, like, some of the rituals and rites and stuff that I think existed in other traditions. Like we were just talking with your mom not long ago about like the practice of feet washing and how like you need to get right with people in the church before you do that, because it protects the authenticity of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just doing it as a performative action, doesn't really mean anything.
And the whole purpose of it is to remind you of.
To submit to each other.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. This is sort of that, for lack of a better word, sort of assurance, right? You have to do that internally, which
Yeah.
makes sense because this is an internal ritual.
Which you guys come from a tradition where foot washing is actually an active means of grace.
Yeah, right.
In most traditions, it's done once on Monday, Thursday, and all the ladies have their pedicures done beforehand because the priest is going to see their feet.
Yeah.
And
But I don't know
so,
what tradition would do it where you seek out that person that you're beefing with, right?
yeah,
And you say, not today.
I've seen it done in a very real sense of repentance and confession, and is actually done by a yearly meeting superintendent to somebody that he actually did wrong, and it was beautiful, and probably saved the yearly meeting at the time. So, but yeah, if it's not done with authenticity, then it becomes a show, and people can see through showiness, and that's one of the biggest issues. That if you actually listen to people during this exodus of the church, one of the biggest things that people have an argument or say about things is no one's real. There's no authenticity. So if they're just gathering for a social event, go where it's real. The people at the Chiefs game, they're passionate. That's real.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff going on in churches isn't, and people see that. So, and hopefully they don't see that here, but I try to be transparent with my own faith as well as encourage transparency. So, yeah, that didn't work right.
Whoops.
Anyway, William Penn once wrote, "True godliness does not turn men out of the world, but enables them to live better in it, and excites their endeavors to mend it. While the wording is archaic, the sentiment isn't. The shared silence gives us strength to live well in the world." So how would that happen?
Well, I mean, it's saying that you put your mind on things above, you recognize God within you, you enjoy those means of grace, and then you go share it with others in whatever way that might be, whether it's at work, not being a jerk, or washing a homeless person's food or something like that. But however, that's what it means, I think.
After a very intense elders meeting once, before you were on the elders board, I came home in tears. And Albert came up to me and he's like, "What's wrong, Dad? I've never seen you like this." And I said, "I feel like I have done nothing in the 20 years that I've been a minister, because nothing's changed." And he just stood there in shock, really. Dad's crying. That doesn't happen. Dad doesn't ever cry. Even when I hit my finger with a hammer, which I've done.
Yeah.
not a blacksmith, but I've hit my thumb with a sledgehammer, and everybody in the shop was hearing the metal on metal, and then they heard the metal on thumb. And they didn't hear me cuss like everybody else in the shop, so all of them came running over, thinking that I dropped it on my head or something, and they're like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna go wash my hands." So, but yeah, that's what I thought of when I read that is, you know, it may not be big, but how we respond to everyday things might help someone else in their ability to cope with things.
And the soul care element of it too. You know, you heal people by first being healed.
Yeah. And then Robert Barkley. Gotta like Penn and Barkley. They're good guys. When I came into the silent assembly of God's people, I felt a secret power among them, which touched my heart. And as I gave way unto it, I found the evil weakening in me, and the good raised up. And so I became thus knit and united into them, hungering more and more ever after the increase of this power and life, whereby I might feel myself perfectly redeemed. And indeed, this is the surest way to become a Christian. I was pretty confident in that. So, yeah, the people that you can sit in silence with are usually the people that you love the most. So, I won't tell about my grandma and grandpa. They share that a lot. Shared that a lot, so. The silence calls us to ask, what does God want? Instead of our usual, what do I want? In silence, what God wants becomes clear. You ever experienced that?
Oh, it's made me laugh. Sorry. Just the way you said it. It's good. That's good.
My calling to become a pastor was like that. I was eating a sandwich listening to a sermon in the park in between work and school, because I went to school. I took like 21 hours a semester because I'm stupid. And I worked a job, 2 jobs, and I was waiting to go to work at the K-State Research Lab and listening to the sermon while I ate a sandwich, and it was Jesus talking to Peter after the resurrection, and took him aside and said, "Feed my sheep" and all that. "Peter, do you love me?" And the radio went silent. It's still playing, but I couldn't hear any of it. And I felt audibly, "Do you love me more than corn? Do you love me more than wheat? Why are you going to the research station when you need to be doing something else?" Which scared the liver out of me. So, because I'm not a talking person at all. After this, I'll go straight to bed and sleep until noon, because I don't talk. But that's the silence of that time. It became clear. I told my mom. She said, "You can't be a pastor because you can't talk."
Well, at least she didn't suggest being a dentist.
Yeah, and then she came and heard me preach once, and she's like, "I'm sorry I ever said that." Still can't talk, but she realized that what she thought and what I thought prior to that was wrong. So,
Your Quaker mom said you need to be able to talk to your pastor.
Yep, she's a very encouraging lady.
And teaching would suit you still less. Some be a dentist, be a success. Yes, doctor.
What could a communal experience of God?
That was the right movie. That was the right movie.
Yeah, well, you're right. Different scene, though.
You still want me to be that? No, okay.
Different scene. And you're not
Quaker
one.
classes get out of hand, don't they? The special discipline we Quakers practice is listening with more than our ears. We listen for the voice that speaks not only in words, but also in the gentle tugs on our hearts and in the beauty our eyes behold. And this is what was kind of interesting to me, because I didn't read this book until now. But isn't that basically what's on the back of that sheet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, this is my favorite chapter because it tells me I was doing something right. So, but yeah, we don't have a liturgy really, but we do. Because there is this movement where you lead to that deep communion. And then you're sent out. That's why I typically do songs, sermon, open worship, song to send us out. And I close the service with "Go in peace." You know, so it's that centering, welcoming, deeper worship, communion, and sending. So it's not written down. I mean, it is obviously, but it doesn't have to be followed completely. But there's something about that, and it's not just Quaker worship either. You can put Catholic worship in that. You can put anything, whatever is the most important part of that worship service. Everything's leading to that.
I really like that too, just for your own prayer life, like, or your own like centering prayer time as a corporate group. Like the centering part to me is like your thoughts are all way out, and then they're like slowly maybe washing away by the river or whatever. And then the welcoming part, it is very welcoming, and start to feel God's presence and the deep worship and communion. Yeah, I really like that. It's like just your not as like necessarily a liturgy, but as your own prayer time.
It's kind of like the points going down the wishing well thing.
So it was showing the different plans of worship between the differing faiths, and there wasn't much difference. There was a difference, but there wasn't much.
That's not in my version. So sad.
All it is same as the other guy, except he added in a
Open worship
worship,
a line of open worship, and different songs, but it was different
as a way to add Quaker stuff to other places.
This also works for yoga, you know, centering, warming up, actually doing work.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that much of life that kind of is like breathing. You know, we have to prepare to do just about everything, and it leads to the important activity.
Yeah, I really like this part, like the descriptions of kind of each of those pieces, and just kind of the like that there can be structure to it, and just like kind of gave it a different way of thinking about like being in silence. So I really like the section.
Being surrounded by spiritual silence and the company of other souls opens us up to meeting God. This can be both peace-giving and terrifying. What if God's word is not one of comfort, but of command?
Then you switched over to Disturbed as opposed to Simon Garfunkel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to worry about that as a kid. God, are you going to tell me to do something hard?
Yeah.
My pastor's wife told us that the people that sit in the back pew get sent to Africa, so I sat in the second to back pew so I wouldn't get sent to Africa.
What the sense of going to be?
I went to a semi-civilized place, Ukraine, instead. Should have sat in row 3. So, yeah, it's
Did
yes.
you go either to California or Florida?
I guess I probably like Ukraine better.
One of those two.
God may speak a command in the silence, but remember that God wants our fellowship. He's not looking to slap us down or around. We do a pretty good job of that ourselves. When we get quiet and still together, we create a space for God to work within us personally and communally. We give ourselves a chance to rest and let that perfect love that drives out fear do its work. Don't rush your centering time. So I've sat with churches that were on the verge of splitting and couldn't have a civil word spoken to anybody within the meeting until we sit in silence. And we wouldn't talk again until we felt led. And they were able to figure out where the problem root was and came up with a way forward. And it saved the church. And it was one of those situations where somebody that had big ideas and a big voice was pushing everybody else to do something that they weren't getting the same message and they didn't understand. He didn't bring them along with him and encourage them. He is just browbeating them. This is the way it's going to be. And it was driving a wedge between everybody to the point that they couldn't function and they were literally about to close. And it's just we can't rush it. We want everything to be now in our culture, but that's not. He's in the stillness, not the loud things.
It's interesting on how that works, not just in the context of a meeting or a church. I'm on the national board for an organization, and we had a very vocal group who wanted us to go in a particular direction. They wanted us to get rid of what had been our headquarters for 50 years and move it to another town because that person who then was the president of the national organization lived in that town. And just having everybody sit and stop. I mean, there were people standing up on opposite sides of the table yelling at each other. And I finally got them to just sit and stop and think about what was going on and why the decision was up there and how they actually felt about the decision. And after about 20 minutes, everyone was so squirmy. It was. And then I go, let's now just quietly why we think it's a good idea and what the cons of it are, and just talk through it instead of yelling at each other. We eventually did move. It made sense because A, we made a lot of money selling our old location. B, the town that we moved to, out of the rather large city that it was in, our rent dropped by down to 25% what it was. So it worked out. It worked, but it was just the fact that there was this group that was pushing too hard and no one was thinking, they were reacting. And this is kind of the same. It works to an extent.
And this statement, sorry,
Go ahead.
this statement, that perfect love that drives out fear, that's the root of all of this. That's that wheel. If you are afraid that you have something to share but you're not sure, like,
Where's that card?
yeah, I was holding it and now I'm not anymore.
Oh, it's over here.
Okay.
But
You guys still
if
want
you,
it?
if I
I'm
mean,
just
I can put it back if we're not gonna look at it.
but it's
I like it.
are you doing this out of perfect love?
Yeah.
Are you doing it and that fear will resolve?
I've been a manager for a group or in a corporate setting before, and that's how I approached my management style as well. I got reported, turned in, saying that I was one of the guys I worked for was a very vocal atheist, and he thought I was judging him, so he reported me to corporate, and they did a big investigation on me. I'm like, no, that's not at all what I was meaning, and it's like I was just informed him of how I was taught, and that I was going to treat him, even though he had totally different ideas about things, I was going to treat him equal. I'm not his manager, we're together running this department, so, and when I left, about 3 years later, I was at the place doing something else, and he came up to me, he's like, there's only 3 managers that I have ever respected in his entire career, and I was on his list after he reported me. So, and he's like, you were always honest and open, you listened, and if it made sense, my idea made sense, we went with that, even though you were the boss. So, and I overruled, and he overruled some of what I thought was best, and I was like, okay, let's do it that way. But it's interesting that it's not just worship. It can become a way of life.
The only time it really doesn't work is in marriage, and that's because if you're having a fight and you go quiet, my wife thinks she won. So. I'm joking, guys.
That's so serious.
Do I need to take cover behind a wall or something?
She's not here right now,
this
so I can
time,
say
so
that.
That doesn't stop the range attack from happening.
I mean, she might be on YouTube.
I would have
so.
said that if she's here. She'd be quiet.
Have you ever heard of Sinbad's rubber hand routine? Don't you run!
I've been reading
That thing has range.
this leadership book from the Kansas Leadership Center, Kansas City Leadership Center thing, and it's called When Everybody Leads, and they talk about workplace disputes often are rooted in fear of loss, and if you can address that, the problem usually dissolves.
Yeah.
And that's again this, if you act out of love, if that is your center, the problem will dissolve.
Yeah. That's in a lot of areas. It's political season. What are all the political ads focused on? All of them are focused on fear. All of them. Doesn't matter who it is. All of them are focused on fear. Very rarely do you get one that actually is positive. And it just drives greater wedges because we're not trying to work together. We're just driving out of fear. As we go, God goes with us. Jesus moves across the waves, calling to the waves in our lives, peace, be still. And our tiny spiritual flashlight fades as his searchlight illuminates the ocean in front of us, around us, and behind us. I like that image.
Tiny flash.
You got a little candle and they got the bat signal.
Those are good, but we can move on. As you pass through the deep silence, you move into communion. No timer goes off, no bell rings. You know you are there because you sense it. Because you sense it's time to stop asking God to speak. And you will know it's time for concentrated listening. It may help to imagine hearing God's voice. What would it sound like? Does he speak in your voice, or does he speak in something else?
Batman.
Jared, you mentioned
Which
that
one?
you heard God's voice. I was just curious. You said, well, the way you said it was that,
Show my age.
you said that,
Bill Cosby.
it was kind I don't know, like, kind of forget the way
Before
you
court
said.
cases,
You
I can
said
understand
you kind of like,
No.
you sensed
early
God's voice
stand-up
clearly
comedy
saying specific
writers.
words. And,
Particularly Noah.
I was just curious,
Who is
was
this
that
really?
sense like a,
Yes,
in
I
your
know,
body,
15 years speaking.
was it, I was just curious how that was like, if you maybe have some language to give a hint at it.
It's hard to explain.
Yeah,
It just was there.
yeah.
Chocolate
So
cake.
the words came to my mind. It, as if I heard,
Yeah,
but it was just there. So, and it said corn, not fish, or feed my sheep,
yeah.
or any of those is just there.
That's awesome.
So, and yeah, it's a lot of times if it is our voice that we're hearing, it's our voice.
Yeah, I mean, we do think like a million thoughts
Yeah.
a second, right? So that's not, is that right?
I have to be careful because since my grandpa's voice pops in because he's somebody that I respect a lot. Usually when I hear something in that voice, it's for me, not for everybody else.
So are we
Because
talking
that's-
God sightings here then?
I love the God signs.
I mean, good.
Maybe.
Have you ever been part of a non-church experience where I felt God's presence that made me feel that God was there?
Oh, sorry.
So that's just everyday life, yeah.
Just like at Walmart or something.
Yeah.
Like not.
And in the book it was about they went to a renewing of the vows at a guy's bar. And they had a meeting for worship in the bar as they renewed their vows in the Quaker way. So, and everybody that was there drinking beer and everything else, they all joined in. It wasn't church, but they were worshiping together. So,
It's like when we ask for a moment of silence for in remembrance of something or like an event or concerned
Sometimes.
people.
sometimes those moments aren't nearly long enough. The moment of silence is shorter than the time it took to say the name.
You know, before a game night on Sunday, I was looking for my games I was going to bring, and I had a thought that said, get the extra deck of cards. And I said, another thought said, nah, I'll leave it. And then I get there, and we were short one deck of cards for a game. I think that it is God. Now that's not super special, right? It's not like that's not a lightning bolt. That's a tiny thing. That's a small thing.
Yeah.
To me, that's the small things. And I think that.
We we did need one more deck. We did.
Is this a God sighting?
If
Possibly.
If
Yeah,
I,
I think
if I
everyone
would have
would
been here, I
possibly,
would have
yeah.
had another deck because I have a deck of cards in my backpack at wherever I go.
Well,
I don't know.
looking
how
forward to
to-
you being there next time. Yes.
They're doomed. It's great.
Doom cards.
Yes.
Oh, dude, that's cool.
So who's the king? Paul Atreides or what?
It's a worm, dude. The giant
Is it suit specific? I'm sorry, I'm getting off the topic. I'm intrigued.
But that
now.
whatever happened to
Not-
Tracy.
I'm intrigued. Hey, I come back around to the subject eventually.
August 4th, come to church, and we'll see.
Quaker Communal Silence invites us to actively participate in the larger tradition of all Christians profess. Quaker silent worship brings us together as equal members of Christ's body. I've never had anyone say that they weren't able to worship with us. I've had people tell me that our church was dead.
At certain points, we were definitely afraid of that. It's weird.
And
Well,
and I asked
at some points, we were rather close. It looked like we were best ourselves than it was about.
now, the reason the church was dead was because we weren't lifting our hands and shouting and dancing the aisles and all that. It was a very big judgment thing.
Okay, well,
And so I asked him, like, well, did you get anything out of it? It's like, oh yeah, that's interesting. It's like, so how can it be dead?
we were worried about
So
it.
someone just came in and said, your church is dead because you guys aren't lifting your hands and dancing to the...
Yep.
Right, you're.
How long did that take for them to say that?
They took me to what's now the church office after service and told me everything that I was wrong about. And I was like, well, I suggest you read a book.
Was that on like day one or something?
So, that was one of the IHOP people that thought they needed help.
Oh.
So,
One of our various attempts at invasions.
they didn't. That particular person didn't come back.
Yeah.
Your mention of Bill
Sometimes
Cosby
I'm not
made me
very
think John King
welcoming.
out.
So,
And you know exactly what I'm talking about.
but yeah, it's if we're in that case, they didn't come to a workshop; they came
Right.
to judge and to prove a point. Yet, even though they came to judge and prove a point, they still got something from it, and it was interesting. And I said, "There's lots of different ways to worship. This is only one, and it's not for everybody. In fact, it's not for most people." So, and said, "You're welcome to come back anytime you want, but this is how we worship. It's how we've worshiped for nearly 400 years, and it works for us. And I've tried other forms of worship. I come back to this. I was part of a very charismatic organization for a while. I came back to this, not because
Which one?
part of the Assemblies of God Church for a while, but and other groups. I was an active member of Campus Crusade for Christ in college, so we went everywhere. So, but I visited a lot of places, and this is where I ended up back at after all of that, even though I really didn't want to. But
I think that's a common experience, you know, when there's in your searching period, you go to the loud, you go to the everything extreme. So you're just hoping for something, and then you realize especially that none of that was
yeah, I got into Ukraine, which got me back here. So it's God still uses it. It's just some of us speak a different language. So, mine's silence.
So that's something that the Fox generation, I mean, they believe that this is a, I guess, minority, right? I mean, this is a minority approach. I just think I'm not used to thinking of that. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm used to thinking of like churches that legitimately think this is for whether or not it goes to everybody, or well, maybe not in the right way, but at least that it is that theoretically everybody could be in the church, right? I mean, it's like the Catholic Church believes, like, okay, there's a place for everyone in our church. Every personality type can exist inside the Catholic Church. You might have to, sort of but you have to as Quaker too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, have outward personality, you have to kind of suppress it. I just wonder if that's a sentiment that, and that's a sentiment that the Fox generation would have shared, was that the Quaker Church, I guess, isn't a universal church. Or maybe that's not.
They thought that they were restoring the primitive church.
Which would have been a universal church, right?
Yeah, they thought that, I mean, they took the story of the upper room, and their interpretation of it was when the Spirit came down on Pentecost, they were in Quaker worship, praying in silence in the upper room. You can look at Scripture and see that if you want to. And they were up there and praying, because it says that. But historically thinking and educationally thinking, I know what they were doing. But the sentiment's still there. That they were there seeking God. How first century Jewish people sought God. And that's when the Spirit came. So the idea is that through every major movement within the church is respond to the Spirit, we obey the Spirit and follow. And Quakers got really big for a time, and then they had the age of quietism where they got small, and then they come back at times. But it's a unique form of the faith, and we've had lots of people come through Willow Creek for just a season of their life because they were injured, spiritually abused in one type of worship, and they couldn't. That's who they were. That form of worship was who they were, but they couldn't go back until they had healing. So they attended here for a while. Had Catholic priests that came to Quaker meetings for a while, so that they could go back into what they were doing. So it's everyone's here for a different reason, but it's also our form of worship. Lots of people have come to try to force change as well, and they usually don't get very far. They can get ministry started, and that's good, but they don't change the roots of who we are, because that's who we are. So we only will go so far. We aren't rigid necessarily, because we sing contemporary songs. Even though I don't really care to sing contemporary songs in worship, I'm actually a hymn person, which is really weird because I pick contemporary songs when I lead worship, but it's
I like a mix of them. I like some modern stuff, some
when I go on when I
traditional.
sing out of silence, it's never a contemporary song. It's a hymn that my grandpa sang in the tractor. So, but that's.
I can remember when we started CD Sundays. I hated CD Sundays. But I learned to live with CD Sundays.
Well, I assume that also added extra work on your end on how to do it.
Well, that
Not
was
him at that time.
it wasn't me. That was
Hey, it wasn't, was it?
So
Are there Quaker hymnals?
there is not an official Quaker hymnal.
Mm-hmm.
You can find one that was in the process of being published. It is available on like Logos Bible software. They have the Quaker hymnal, and I have it downloaded on my computer.
Yeah.
It's basically the exact same hymnal that everybody else used, minus all the Christian soldier songs and
Right.
all the patriotic songs and stuff like that. They took out all the songs that were war related, and that's about it. So it's kind of funny because
You okay?
it's.
Season that one.
But they didn't
I saw
use.
that.
You'd think that they would use Mennonite hymnals, but
I was
they
gonna say
don't.
it's probably similar. If it
Yeah,
is.
I've seen a few meetings
That's
that
rough
use the brethren
It's probably didn't share.
hymnals.
Yeah.
Some use really old Lutheran hymnals. And
Yeah.
reprinted
With the
them.
solfege notes and
Oh, do you know about what's it called?
solfege.
Wait,
Some of them use the Jesus
I can't
Movement hymnal, where they have
The different shape.
Beatles songs in it too.
where
What?
they're singing and they go like
Simple,
that. Yeah,
yeah.
that kind of thing. What's it called?
But
I forget.
I mean, I do like some
Shape
Beatles
notes?
music, but
No, I'm
No,
not.
Spirit
Hitler.
Heart.
Okay, my arms the right
Yeah,
way. Okay.
it's,
The wrong
Spirit
way.
Heart.
Right. You're doing it all wrong if you're doing that.
it's
Dude, that comes up in these conversations way too much.
what?
It looks like he's got a football game.
Yeah.
It is hard. Yeah, that's right.
Somebody brings up-
There's another name for it. No singing. There you go. No
Oh
singing.
yeah.
Cold
Yeah, but
Mountain.
also
Uh-huh.
Movie Cold Mountain does that.
Shape
What is that called?
So
Shape note is another
shape
one.
note. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think. Yeah, shape note.
it's
Okay.
actually a really good way to sing. But
I have the book, the Heart book or whatever, but it's hard to learn that stuff. It's actually weird. It's very different.
anyway, next Tuesday is Finding Answers Together.
Sweet.
If we have a question. So
If
it's
not,
a
I
question.
just think
If you
about
want
bringing
to
this
look into
question.
that, but
They haven't been answered yet?
Well, each person would have a completely different answer for it, for some of those questions that I wrote. Your answer might be different than mine on the same question,
so hopefully those
and not wrong.
the Finding Answers Together have been beneficial to people, but I have fun looking them up.
I really love like when we do Holy Expectancy together here. I really enjoyed the long like that we do it for a long time. Just like some of the things that is in the book that you said as well, like about not wanting to worship the silence. Like it's not about being silent. It's about holy expectancy. About being expectant. I think that's what even Bill says. It's not about science, it's about expectancy. And then how, like in the history, like you just said, like Quakers were awesome. Then they started obsessing with quietness, silence, and things got messed up. And now they left that behind. But it probably is me, and this is just this personal issues I have probably. But like, the reason why at first I didn't like that thing that Tracy took away the thing is because I felt like it was overbearing. It was like too much. It was like putting up a wall. Like, don't speak unless you're improving the silence. You better not say a word. And it just felt really like we care more about the quietness than we care about you possibly having a word from God. And I think that's just coming from me. I'm not saying that it's necessarily even accurate, but just hearing like this stuff, like we don't worship the silence and quietism, messed up Quakerism. I just wonder and I love the silence, and in my own personal prayer life, it's silence. I'm not spouting off a bunch of words. God, please help them. God, please help them and me. And it's not just I love you, God. Worship you, God. You're awesome, God. Can I have a new car, God? It's not just that the whole time. It is the silence. And so while I revere and love being silent with Jesus, hopefully he's a little talkative, but a little squirmy. But I just wonder. I don't know. Sometimes it just bothers me a little bit, and maybe it's my problem. And I'm willing to hear that. And from you guys, Aubrey will tell me though. She's not here though, so. But like maybe it is my problem, but it just feels like there's like we put up walls for people to speak. But at the same time, we want people, like silence is not normal for most people. So we definitely want to like get them into that silence, like get people into being silent for an hour. But also we want them to realize it's not about being silent. Like we're not just here being still for an hour. That's not what it's about at all. Even though it can be a means of grace if you do it from the right heart. But at the same time, I feel like there's that a little too much blockage, or like a little too much of a wall of don't speak unless it's really good. And here's a bunch of rules for you to go by if you want. Now the way you talked about that thing made me like it more. But I still have a little bit of that feeling inside of me about it too at the same time.
And it can come across as don't speak. But it comes from 400 years of history.
But you just said we failed when we started focusing on quiet.
We didn't fail necessarily.
We backslid.
Most of the things that people remember Quakers for, what they really remember Quakers for, happened during the Quietism era. World War I and the American Friends Service Committee, that's out of Quietism. The Underground Railroad was out of the Quietism movement.
That doesn't lend value to Quietism though.
No. What I'm saying is we weren't. It's not. We still ministered. It's just most of the things that we are remembered for happened during that time frame.
I think I was just using hyperbole by saying we failed. I didn't mean that. Lots of good things happened during the Quietism era. But Quietism itself is something that we we think is bad, right? Like
worshiping the silence is what a lot of people got involved in.
Or even thinking it's
and very legalistic.
Yeah, legalistic about it. Yeah.
Where if you married outside the meeting, then you were no longer welcome.
Well, I'm just focusing on the legalism around silence, though.
Yeah.
Not about marriage.
If you have been here if your family has been here for over 3 generations, chances are one of your ancestors was a Quaker. They got kicked out of meeting. Because that's how many people got removed from meeting during the era of Quietism.
Okay.
So
that's a good example of why.
So there was very much things that went wrong during that time, but there's a lot of things that were very, very good as well.
Yeah, I'm not judging it as a whole. I used hyperbole, and I didn't mean that at all.
And that's the question that
trying to make a point with that.
Brought up about why aren't we focused on Fox's miracles? That also comes into play. We weren't focused on his miracles because the ministry is what people like Penn and the people that started Quakerism here encouraged us to do. Make the world a better place. And yeah, miracles may happen as you're doing that, but the focus is your obedience to God.
Well, focus is on Jesus' obedience to God, but I don't mean to say like that era was wrong, and I'm not even talking about miracles, like, well, unless you think everything's a miracle. But what I mean is more just what I guess what I'm asking for is just maybe a critique of my feelings or discussion on the topic about maybe quietism still sticks around in the church a little bit. And now every single denomination, every single church on this planet has things that are sticking around in it. So I'm not saying Quaker, everyone is on an equal footing here. But since I'm a part of it, and I do love it, and I've been enjoying it since I've been here, and I want to keep enjoying it. I just, I would like that kind of, that inner thought that I kind of have, like that. Maybe I kind of feel like quietism has stuck around a little bit in the Quaker church. And maybe I'm completely off, but that's why I was just wanting to maybe discuss a little. And like what are some little steps? Like, I feel like little steps right now, we're doing it right now. Like you starting this, Jared, this is not little, this is a big step in my opinion. This is a great step, especially the holy expectancy part and all the teaching, talking about Quaker and learning. But like, those are, I was just sharing my feelings. Like sometimes I feel like the quietism stuck around a little bit, and that's part of the reason I was like a little salty about the pamphlet thing. But like during holy expectancy, I don't feel like there's any wall at all. I like that, wall at all. But like rather, like I feel like we're all encouraged to kind of experiment in the expectancy. I love that.
Could I say something here?
Please.
Quietism still exists. It isn't common in Evangelical Friends. It still is a major issue in unprogrammed Friends.
Can we define quietism? Because I'm not sure everybody is understanding quietism the same way. And I don't know exactly
Well,
what it is.
My take on it is it's a tendency to concentrate more on inwardly on our group, and anybody who isn't quiet with us in our group is ostracized. Quakers were here, and then they became more and more concentrated, and they started, like Jared was talking about, shoving people who are outliers away. And we're going to make our core that all of us are the same, and then we're going to do these things. That we're the right ones type thing. It was very much a mentality like that. And it has been an issue, like I say, Evangelical Friends, because we opted for having pastors and not just concentrating on silence. We pulled in some, but we also had a trained guidance. Whereas with unprogrammed Friends, it very much is dependent on the clerk and the various elders in the meeting and how they run the meeting. In our own example here in Kansas City, Penn Valley, which is unprogrammed Friends, was very Christ-based. It swung over into very much a universalist bent.
Even got into New Age.
Yeah, even wandered over into the whole New Age Christian realm, and not even New Age Christian, and now has wandered back into being very Christ-centered again. And that you can track by who was their clerk and what was going on at the time. And that's true of unprogrammed meetings in general. You can go back east and go to an unprogrammed meeting people are sitting in meeting, and when they speak, are talking about reading various Indian texts and all over the world, Native American texts, stuff like that. Very not Christ-centered. And you go next town over or within the same city to another unprogrammed meeting, and you could be very Christ-centered. So it turns out all over the place. And that's part of becoming insular within themselves.
But in Quietism, that's something that, does it predate Quakerism? Right? Because it's like an offshoot where people believe that you had to be quiet to experience God, or
It's not a Quaker.
that's how you rise up to God, is by not speaking.
It's not a
Literal
Quaker
silence.
thing. We are kind of.
It's your ladder to God, and that's where it's kind of heretical.
It's something that it happens in every group.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter if it's Quaker or any group, that you get focused on something that isn't. You get focused on the peripheral ideas instead of the central idea. So that's what caused the Reformation. You know, they're focusing on indulgences and purgatory instead of Christ. You know, why don't we just point everybody to Christ so they don't have to pray you out of purgatory? You know, if you're already not going to purgatory, then that's better, right? So every group has something like that. Every movement within a group has something like that, where we get focused on just ourselves and focused on the peripheral type things instead of the central theme. So Quakers call it quietism because we were quiet.
But we didn't make up quietism.
No.
We latched onto it.
We
We like that. That kind of matches with us. Let's do it. And so Quakers in their meetings, people would speak when they were moved to God. But when quietism kind of slithered its way in there, then that's people would get kicked out if they spoke, because hey, you just messed up our silence. You just knocked us down the runs on our ladder to God. And that's what quietism is, paraphrased by Eric. I'm sure if you Google it, there will be some history on where it came from, exactly what they exactly do.
If you just Google quietism, you will get Quaker stuff, because we coined the term quietism.
We did?
Yes.
We coined it. Oh.
So, if you notice, at every chapter in this book, he says we don't worship silence.
He did make a point of saying that.
Are you
Pretty
saying
much
that you're, with
everything.
the card is that it makes you feel like it's
Holy
kind of
hush.
worship silence a little bit more than it is. I can see it being like helpful, or I can see it kind of.
I think what you're picking up.
Well, that plus the don't speak unless spoke. I mean, unless my God. That's true though. I mean, that's actually okay, I guess. But don't speak unless it's going to improve the silence. Like, who's going to improve the silence? Who's going to improve it? I don't think anyone's going to improve the awe of God. Who's going to improve the awe of God? Not me.
The silence might not, right? I think the idea is that silence might. God is in people speaking to. They're called to speak, right? So it would not. It's not going to hurt the silence. Maybe God doesn't want there to be silence. If He's calling someone to speak, then obviously God is in the speech. Then God moves around, I guess would be my sense during the meeting. Is God's moving. Sometimes silence. So
God is in the little children tripping over each other too.
And that's
and like one of the quotes from this chapter, he's talking about when you're upset at people and you're like, I don't like that personality or whatever, and it kind of messes with you into silence, and you almost want to respond to some people when they speak. Because you're kind of disagree with them, and it actually reminded me of, like, I hope my parents aren't listening to this. My mom sometimes listens to this, but sometimes, I feel upset at my parents and even my little brother sometimes, and like I feel like in a spiritual sense, like almost a me prideful sense, and in prayer they'd be praying something like, not theologically sound, but found like Bill says, actively loving them in the silence, like actually maybe attempting a little bit, and then I think Holy Spirit helps you to like feel love towards them and say, oh my gosh, I love this person, my mom, my dad, my brother. And I found personally my prayers when I pray with my family or whatever, like that transformed like me and the atmosphere and everything. And so people in this, I forgot where I was going with that, but now I remember. So people in silence, if they start speaking and you're like, gosh, they listen to NPR too much, check yourself there. It's okay that they spoke, and it's okay that it's not perfect. it was. I don't know if it ever was going to be perfect, because even when we hear from God, no matter what, we're probably interpreting it a little bit, and so it's probably not going to be perfect. And I've lost control of my body before, and the words coming out of my mouth, and I don't profess that to be perfect, even though I have zero control with the words coming out of my mouth, and those words having your grace. That's pretty close to perfect, not quite. My point being, though, it's okay to, instead of getting annoyed that someone just broke the silence, it's okay to use that as an opportunity to actively love them. So I think like even a little more talking to people every once in a while is a good opportunity to get into that love river and send it their way.
I think to me is that the card is for the person, right? So the card's really not forced in any way.
No.
And so I think when people are, if somebody is maybe they're talking about maybe they made a mistake, maybe they, that's how everybody should respond. I mean, you're responding with love, it's to the person, and maybe it is God delivering, right? Like you're saying, an imperfect message. But so the card, I guess I just see is just more for me, so that if I am feeling like, and so maybe just calling to you to, okay, just assess, and not so much because people maybe for the silence, but I guess I would think more, like I think maybe Dave was saying earlier, like there might be people that are feeling called to say something, but if they feel like the meeting is dominated by certain people, which isn't how it is now, but that seems to be kind of like my sense of how it might have been when they created the card. In a sense, like certain people are dominating meetings, but other people either they feel like they can't speak, or if they do speak, they're going to be responded to in a way that's kind of argumentative and it's not of the spirit,
Well, let me say, I disagree with that right now.
Anyway, that's I guess how I see it. It's like the card is not meant to be, and I'm not really necessarily defending the card. I'm just saying I think the card is meant to be, it's just meant to be like, here's a note, you can look at this, it's for you. If you don't agree with it, there's no enforcement, right? It's not a set of rules, it's not a law, it's just here's some things to think about.
It's a suggested thought process.
Yeah.
It's making sure that you're sure that it actually is coming from God, not from you.
Yeah, and
It's just a friendly suggestion.
Right, and hopefully
But I love the card now. So after rolling it together with you guys and hearing Abby and hearing you speak about it, Taylor, I do like the card a lot.
I know it's not a part of this class, but I try to, I'm not always successful, but I try. One of my proudest moments as clerk of this meeting is when we created our mission statement. That was a long afternoon. We started out with paragraphs. Worked it down to 3 lines. And I think it kind of, I hope, sums us up, and it also is something that I try and think about before I open my mouth sometimes. I don't always succeed, but I try.
There it is, just in case you need it.
And that was 20 years ago now.
14. I've only been here 14. And his first year I was here.
First year.
Okay, so he knows the date well. Got it. Okay.
It's the 3rd month that I was here, actually.
Do you know the second?
We had just been through a lot of trauma as a meeting. We now had 2 pastors, and that was a thing. And we had a mission statement that was 20 years old or more.
And 3 paragraphs long.
And 3 paragraphs long, which no one could tell you what it said.
Yeah.
And so we worked and we worked, and we condensed and we condensed, and that's what we came up with. And I still think it's one of the better things that we at the meeting as a group have produced, because it really brings out what we should be about.
It's Trinitarian, and it also is
And that was totally accidental.
It is authentic, and it is life that Christ lived. Because you'll hear me mention quite often the rhythm of life that Jesus had is he made it his custom to worship with the community. You'll always read about him going to the synagogue, worshiping with people. He withdrew often to the isolated places to pray, and he ministered to the needs of the people. So that's also there. So loving God is the worship, embracing the Holy Spirit is the prayer, and ministering or living the love of Christ with others is what we do when we're not here. So
That's a good one.
If I were to do anything with the little chart, it would be replace it with this. If you say to yourself, is what I'm saying meant in a loving and kind manner? And then work from there, and generally it would be fine.
I like that. I do like the chart now, though. So
good, because we're going to
I
keep
agree.
the chart.
Oh.
I don't care.
Hey, our clerk says he may want to replace it, so I don't know.
No,
We might have to vote.
It's
The clerk is above the master. We all know that. So
that's
that's what we learned in our class.
Yeah.
True or false?
That's not how any of this works, mate. That's a different thing.
I want to thank
That's a
you.
commercial.
I want to thank you, Eric, for what you shared about how you're feeling with it. I think that you've really recognized that it's a powerful thing to have a document like that, and I think you recognize what has already happened in this denomination, right? This has been used to separate and divide, and I think, because we're human, because this is all an experiment, right? None of us is ever in the clear of that, and just because we're doing it well now doesn't mean that we're in the clear.
Yeah.
And I think, entering into a community where we do this is a vulnerable and somewhat, it's not easy, and it's not, there's no assurance that we're all going to do it right, and there's no assurance that we're not going to hurt each other in the process, but this mission statement is what that is about. I see that, speaking I see it as a risk, because what if I say the wrong thing? What if I, or what if I don't share? And if I'm interfering with God's message, it feels almost like a risky thing. And so I think identifying hesitation and thoughts about it is so appropriate, because what we're doing is this is important. This is a heavy. I keep wanting to think of the word dangerous, but that's not what it is. It's you know what I mean? It's risky.
It's there's fear there.
Yeah.
So it draws us back into that perfect love casts out fear.
Right.
So it's scary because we aren't in control, which is what the garden was about. The story of the garden. They wanted control. They wanted to know not the knowledge of good and evil. They didn't want to just trust God. They wanted to know it as well. And that goes back to the commandments. Are they rules?
Right.
Or are they teaching?
Yeah.
We can look at them as rules, or we can look at them as teaching. So, and where's that going to work? Somebody asked me once, why aren't we doing the Old Testament law? It's like, we should. I'm like, okay, do it.
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't agree? I'm like, no, do it. If it brings you closer to God, do it. I'm like, and tell me how it goes after a year. If it brought you closer to God, then I want to know.
Because I want to do it too.
And he came back later. He's like, it's all legalism, and I'm focused so much on obeying every law that I'm like, yeah. So how's your relationship with God now? It's like there isn't one. I've just focused on the rules. And that's the same thing with quietism. We're focused on being quiet, worshiping the silence, not making a scene, instead of being obedient and submitting to God and submitting to each other and living the love of Christ with others. It's still focused on me. So it's a sin because it's focused on me. I'm quiet and you disturb the quiet. So you need to leave. So instead, our mission statement, there's not me in there anywhere. It's living the love of Christ with others. I'm actively participating with others. So
An iteration or two before that, there was, we love God. And there were a lot of we's in there.
Yeah.
We do this, we do that. And we kind of eventually decided that that was a little too exclusive.
and it's very self-centered.
Yeah. Right. It's not us. Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of it. A lot of versions of this that went through that whole meeting. And many of them weren't even written down.
So anyway, that's all we got for this week. And if you have a question the next couple of days, let me know. Otherwise, we'll.
Can we bring him to that night too? Is that possible? Just for discussion, no research, off the cuff.
I just showed you my list of questions.
You can ask questions, yeah, that's fine. It's just,
I mean, like, if no one
don't
brings,
expect a complete answer.
well, yeah,
So,
if no one brings
yeah.
anything, like, can we just plan on
Yeah.
we can bring something?
Well, I'll prepare something on one of the queries or something that's the go-to. But that's it. So,
I have a backup question.
Yeah.
Nobody comes up with anything good.
Okay.
Can you talk about? No, can you talk
Yeah,
about? the-
Jared reads our questions and they're terrible.
Yeah,
He's like, these are bad.
I would love your perspective on, like, what is that verse that's like the behemoth or whatever? Everyone's like, it's a dinosaur.
We're talking about it.
Funny story. Dave and I were just talking about that before you guys came in. Yes.
Before I before we were here together. This was the whole thing. One is a behemoth and one
I'm
is a
so
leviathan.
curious about it.
Are we talking about an elephant and a whale or something?
I'll tell you
Now that's
right now what the most likely answer to that is.
Answered immediately.
The behemoth
Yeah.
is most likely the hippopotamus.
Actually, yeah. That's
Because
that has been commonly accepted.
Because the
Yeah.
hippopotamus
Yeah,
is extremely fast
Okay,
and
this is true.
terrifying.
Yeah. And we'll kill you.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it can get loud.
And
it
it
can roar.
lazies around on the banks of
the.
the rivers. The Leviathan is most likely whales.
Okay.
Because if you read about Leviathan playing, or God playing with the Leviathan in the sea, what do whales do? When they see boats and stuff.
That's true.
When you see a picture of a whale, it's usually doing what? It's jumping out of the water and making a big splash. So that's the most likely thing.
Okay.
The hippopotamus one is pretty well agreed upon in many sessions that I've come across.
I've never heard that. Well, you took my.
Yeah.
So I'll have to come up with another one.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's better. It's a good question.
Most people think it is dinosaurs or dragons or something like
Right.
that.
It's more fun.
Well, dragons are a
It
different
is.
thing than leviathans and
But
and
if
behemoths.
you think about what dragons represent historically, it's chaos.
In
God
European,
tamed
it's
chaos.
and they're
So
presented differently.
that's what all Scripture is about: is God taming chaos.
Europe. It's more of a
So, but
evil
Yeah.
Eastern culture.
Anyway.
I'll come up with more fun ones.
I can look into that some more
Looked at it too.
and show why it is. Most likely that if you want.
Mississippi store.
I really do.
For those online, we'll go ahead and end. So,
Yeah, in that before we play Mississippi Squirrel, so we don't have any
All of
good
those
issues.